everybody.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Lights Out Podcast. I'm your host, Josh. As always, I've got my brother and producer, Joel, here with me as well. And today we are covering one of the most horrific events in human history, and that is the 2017 Las Vegas Massacre. I'm sure everyone has heard of this event. I mean, how could you not? This is probably one of the most terrifying things any of us could experience in real life. I mean, this is just something that is even today hard to wrap your head around, that somebody could carry out a massacre like what we saw in Las Vegas. I want to make it abundantly clear that one of the reasons why I cover these is not just because it's this shocking and crazy and horrific event, but also because I think more often than not, when terrible things like this happen, and I mean, it could be anything horrible that happens to people, that sometimes it seems like we all kind of go through it for just a brief period of time, and then we all just kind of move on. And in some regards, that's good because, you know, we're moving on from something that we honestly want to forget. But at the same time, I feel that it's important that we don't forget that these things happen, not only for the victims' sakes. I mean, the amount of people that lost their lives in this event is truly staggering, but just the mere fact that, you know, if this remains in our conscious and in the back of our minds, then maybe, you know, just maybe we'll be able to prevent something like this from happening again. And I feel like oftentimes the news media and, you know, television channels, they cover it for a brief time, and then once everybody's kind of moved on, that's the end of it. And you only hear about it on the 10, 20, 30-year anniversaries, and then it's just kind of gone, like it never happened. So that's why I cover these, is because I think it's important that we always remember what these people went through on this day, and that this could happen to any of us. I mean, these are all just innocent people that were enjoying a festival, a music festival. I mean, how many of us go to music festivals and probably have had the thought of what would happen if somebody came in here and just opened fire on us?
Right.
What would I do?
Right. I mean, you're in a very vulnerable location, and, you know, basically someone could look at you at every angle.
Especially outside, like this event was. I mean, even inside though, sometimes I think, you know, what if somebody started shooting in here, or even the movie theater? I mean, even to this day, after the Aurora Theater shooting, I've never not had that thought when I go into a movie theater of what happens if somebody came in and started shooting. What am I going to do? Am I going to hide? Am I going to run out? What exit I'm going to go through? I mean, right. I feel like that's kind of all become a part of our conscious at this point. And it's sad that that's the world we're in, but it's kind of the cold hard reality of things, is like, these things are not stopping. They're going to continue to happen, and it almost feels like there's not much we can do. And I think one of the ways that we might be able to figure out how we might be able to prevent something like this is by looking into the lives of the perpetrators. And we don't do this in order to give them fame or give them attention or make them look a certain way. It's more so to hopefully try to dig in and understand what leads people to this point where they decide, you know what, I don't care about anything in this world. I have no love for anything. I've become essentially a machine where I have no conscience. I don't have any sort of feeling about the world anymore. I'm cold. And they decide to carry out an absolutely tragic event like this. So that is what we are going to be diving in today. It's going to be a very heavy, very disturbing, graphic episode. Hopefully we're not going to scare anybody too bad, but I think it's important to get a really realistic understanding of what people went through. Because I mean, oftentimes the news media, they really kind of glaze over things. They don't really show you the reality of things.
Yeah.
They give you a very watered down version. They don't tell you the, sort of the cold hard facts about what really went down. So that is sort of my goal for today, is to try to give you a very clear picture of what happened in October of 2017 in Las Vegas, Nevada. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Every Plate Honey. Bartleby, and Stamps.com. And I wanted to say that, when I do these episodes, to be totally transparent with you, it's hard to obviously do sponsors on these types of events. And the more I've thought about it, the more I've realized that, I want to, especially in this case, because so many people are affected by this horrible tragedy, that I'm going to donate all of the ad revenue from this episode to the Vegas Strong Resiliency Center. And they're a nonprofit organization that are actually helping provide support to Las Vegas and victims of these terrible attacks. And I feel like it's only right of me to do that and do, what little I can to not only spread awareness about, these victim stories and what they went through that day, but also, provide what little relief that I can. So just know that when you hear the sponsors in today's episode, please listen to them, please support them, because you're in turn going to be supporting the Vegas Strong Resilience Center, because I'm going to be donating all that ad revenue to them. So thank you guys for supporting the show and supporting that organization. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the Las Vegas massacre. So the perpetrator of this event was Stephon Paddock. And if we go back, there's not a whole lot of information about his backstory, but Stephon Paddock was born on April 9th, 1953 in Clinton, Iowa, to his parents, Benjamin and Dolores. He also had 3 younger brothers as well. And what's kind of crazy, I guess you could say, is that his father was actually a notorious bank robber. And during his first arrest in 1960, he tried to run over an FBI agent, ended up being convicted and sent away for 20 years in prison, but actually escaped prison and was on the run from 1968 to 1978. But instead of going back to prison, they allowed him to pay a $100,000 fine, and he ended up being released. But after Benjamin Paddock was released from prison, he never actually went back to his family. Stephon was actually only 7 years old when his father was arrested, and his mother told him and his brothers that their father was actually dead. And he wasn't really dead, but he was dead to the family at that point. His father didn't actually pass away until 1998. So just his parents' backstory is very bizarre. His father was a criminal, so definitely keep that in mind. But Stephon Paddock was viewed as friendly and easygoing growing up. As an adult, he enjoyed entertaining friends and traveling, and he was well liked by coworkers, neighbors, and friends. He had several jobs through the years, working as an auditor, accountant, apartment manager, mail carrier, and real estate investor. He owned multiple rental properties all over the country. All of these jobs gave him plenty of money for his favorite hobby, gambling. Some of those around him even viewed Stephon as a professional gambler. And for most of his adult life, he lived in LA. He got married and divorced twice, but never had any kids that anyone knew of. He lived in Florida near his mother and brother for a little while and spent some time in Texas. But eventually he settled down in Nevada. He preferred the dry desert air and easy access to his favorite hobby, gambling and all of the nightlife and casinos. As he got older, he stopped entertaining though and became sort of a recluse. And in 2012, he actually tried to sue the Cosmopolitan, which if you've never been to Las Vegas, the Cosmopolitan is a very, very upscale hotel, very beautiful. And he tried to sue them for $10,000 after he slipped and fell there. But this case was dismissed. In 2015, he moved into a 55-year-old and older retirement community in Mesquite, Nevada, where he lived there with his girlfriend, Mary Lou Danley, which Mesquite, Nevada is about 80 miles northeast of Las Vegas. Stephon was a heavy drinker and kept a very low profile in his retirement community. Neighbors barely saw him, and when they did, he rarely acknowledged their presence. Other than going out to drink and singing karaoke with Mary Lou, he did not have much of a social life. However, Stephon spent a lot of time on high-stakes gambling in Vegas, often buying chips worth over $10,000 in a single day, which is an amount that's pretty high, and at this amount it has to be reported to the government. He mostly played video poker though, and the casino hosts knew him very well. And oftentimes, because he was a frequent customer, spent a lot of money with the hotels and casinos, they oftentimes gave him rooms and meals on the house. But since he played online, he wasn't known in any other gambling circles. So because he was playing video poker and not poker in person, he was able to kind of remain this anonymous person. Stephon identified as an atheist and had no history of violence or political extremism. He never showed any interest in machine guns or automatic weapons, as far as we know. The only things that he had on his record were a few minor traffic citations, but otherwise it was totally clean. He did take medication for anxiety, and also he refused antidepressants when his doctor told him that he might be bipolar. His anxiety may have developed from his gambling and his gambling debts. He lost a lot of money after moving to Nevada, but most of that debt was paid off by the fall of 2017. That year, Stephon really started struggling. He was 64 years old at that point, and he wasn't interested in going out with Mary Lou anymore, and pretty much decided to check out of the relationship. September of 2017, Mary Lou was actually visiting the Philippines when he randomly wired her, I think $100,000 to $150,000. And she assumed that this was like a parting gift for her, that he was ending the relationship, and this was basically telling her, here's some money, that's it, we're done. Stephon also started experiencing some health issues. He started taking germs much more seriously than he had ever before, and he had very strong reactions to smells that normally didn't bother him. He also felt like he was sick and tired all the time and had random physical pains. He only complained to family members, but they brushed it off as typical problems with aging. No one suspected anything really serious was going on with Stephon. But despite all of this information, which is just basically telling us he's a typical 64-year-old single man with a lot of money, like so many other men are out there like him. But secretly, Stephon was devising a plan that would become the deadliest mass shooting by a single gunman in North American history. That to me is just so crazy about this whole thing, is the fact that most of the times when you go look at these people that carry out domestic terrorist attacks, mass shootings, and you look at their background, there's usually things you can point to say those had an effect on them, that person, to a point where they decided that enough is enough. I need to, take matters into my own hands and execute something truly evil. But with Stephon, it's like, as far as we know, and I mean, maybe there's things we don't know about him. Maybe there's things that we don't know about his past. I'm sure there's some secrets out there that we just don't know about him, because otherwise this is just makes no sense. A true mystery on why he would conduct this horrific attack. But in the days leading up to the attack, Stephon started secretly stockpiling weapons and ammunition, and also started researching different venues all over the country, looking for the perfect spot where he could do the most damage with a mass shooting. He looked at venues in Santa Monica, Chicago, and Boston, and actually started traveling around in order to scope them out as early as May 2017. That August, he stayed in a hotel room overlooking the Lollapalooza Music Festival in Chicago, which was one of his potential targets. In September, we know that he searched online for things like SWAT weapons, ballistics chart 308, SWAT Las Vegas, and asking questions like, do police use explosives? He also carefully tracked crowd sizes at Santa Monica beaches and Las Vegas concerts. That August, him and Mary Lou stayed at the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino directly across from Las Vegas Village, which is a 15-acre open-air venue on the Strip. He was scoping it out as a potential target because he knew that the annual Route 91 Harvest Country Music Festival was just around the corner. During this stay in the Mandalay Bay, he spent a lot of time looking out the different windows, going back and forth from one to the other, which Mary Lou even thought was kind of odd. On September 17th, he checked into the Ogden condos in downtown Las Vegas. The Life is Beautiful Festival, which is an outdoor music and art festival, was set to start on September 22nd. He had researched the lineup and attendance numbers for both concerts and found rooms where he'd be able to see the crowds. And that's when he made his final choice. The Route 91 Harvest Festival was held September 29th to October 1st, 2017. It was the fourth and last year it would be held. The lineup of performers was released by the Las Vegas radio station 95.5 The Bull on Twitter before the festival. Huge crowds were expected to attend, especially on the last day for the headliner, country music star Jason Aldean. Stephon checked into the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino, which is located on the south end of the Las Vegas Strip, 2 days before the festival started. And during the stay, he had specifically requested a high-level suite in the 43-story hotel with a view of the festival. If you've never been to Las Vegas before, it can sometimes be hard to wrap your head around the size of these hotels. These Las Vegas hotels are
massive.
Not even like what you would like, bigger than any hotel. I think most people, especially people in other countries like the UK or Australia, could even imagine. Like, these things are absolutely just hundreds of thousands of square feet, so many rooms. I mean, because you wonder, like, well, why aren't people noticing this guy? Why isn't anybody saying, why aren't people noticing his weird behavior? But you can truly, in Vegas, you can truly disappear. Like, oh yeah, there's so many people, there's so much going on that you can basically not be seen by anyone because there isn't enough people paying attention with what everybody's doing that they can account for what everybody's doing. So it's very easy to just disappear into these massive hotels. Some of the last footage that we have of Stephon Paddock come from when he was checking in at the VIP counter. He ended up checking into room 135 on the 32nd floor on Monday, September 25th. And he also reserved the adjoining room 134 in Mary Lou's name, which would be free on September 29th. And from this room, he had the perfect view of the festival setup at Las Vegas Village directly across from the hotel. And it is literally directly across the hotel. I know when I stayed there, actually I've stayed at Mandalay Bay, I think once or twice. And I've stayed on a room that overlooked Las Vegas Village, and it is not that far away. So just keep that in mind. Surveillance footage shows Stephon in the casino playing video poker, watching TV in a restaurant, buying snacks at a newsstand, and talking with hotel staff on at least 10 separate occasions. But to everybody who talked to him, it just seemed like a normal stay for him. I mean, he was there a lot. He spent a lot of time in the casino, so there's literally nothing out of the ordinary for him to be doing this. At first, he didn't bring any bags to his room. He hung out at the hotel and had dinner, and then around 5 p.m., he brought his Chrysler Pacifica minivan to the valet area, and a bellman helped him unload 5 suitcases. He insisted on staying close to his bags, so the bellman let Stephon come up with him through the service elevator, which is not something they typically do, but because he's kind of like this VIP guest, they let him use the service elevators. At 9:40, he left his hotel room with 2 suitcases and then drove home to his house in Mesquite. He stayed the night there and didn't return to Las Vegas until the following night. Around 8 p.m. on Tuesday, September 26, he stopped at the Ogden. The Life is Beautiful festival was over by now, and he still had his room there. So clearly was seriously considering attacking that festival as well. But later that night, he went back to Mandalay Bay, and another bellman unloaded 7 suitcases from his minivan. And again, Stephon followed the bellman and his suitcases through the service elevator all the way up into his room. He then headed to the casino and gambled for 8 hours straight. And again, this was all completely normal for him. And everybody that knew him or had crossed paths with him before said there was nothing that raised any sort of alarm bells for them. But by Wednesday, he had 12 bags in his hotel room. And inside these bags were just loads and loads of guns and ammunition. And the bellman had no idea that they were helping him assemble an absolute arsenal in his room. That night, he loaded 2 suitcases into his van, stopped at the Ogden, and then drove home for the night. On Thursday, he left home and stopped at a gun store where he bought a bolt-action rifle and then proceeded to go to the gun range. Later on, he ended up getting back to the Mandalay Bay, where a bellman again helped him unload a white container and 3 suitcases. Then Stephon went to the casino and gambled until dawn. On Friday, September 29th, the first day of the Route 91 Harvest Festival, he checked into the second room, 134, under his girlfriend's name and using her ID. After the staff cleaned his room, he asked them to leave the 2 food service carts outside. That night, he drove home again and returned to the hotel at 6 a.m. the next morning. Again, he brought 2 additional suitcases back to his room. On the afternoon of September 30th, a Saturday, he put do not disturb signs on both of his room doors. He then proceeded to go to the valet area and got 2 more bags from his van. After gambling for a while, he drove home again, but he returned to the hotel at 3 a.m. on Sunday, October 1st, which was also going to be the final day of the Route 91 Harvest Festival. That night, there was going to be over 22,000 people gathered in the Las Vegas Village to watch the performance of country singer Jason Aldean. Stephon obviously knew that. So for the earlier part of that morning, he was just gambling like normal, and then ended up going back to his room at 7:37 a.m. At 12:16 p.m., he exited the elevator to the parking garage. He got 2 more suitcases and a bag from his van, and at this point, he now had 21 suitcases, 2 additional bags, a white container, and his laptop bag in his 2 rooms. And throughout the rest of Sunday, he started working on putting his plan into action. He opened and closed and unlocked and relocked both room doors multiple times. He rigged cameras to the 2 service carts and put them in the hallway. He put a camera in the peephole of his room door. He then used an L-shaped bracket to secure the hallway door that opened onto the 32nd floor. He screwed the bracket into the door and the door frame to make sure it could not be opened. Then, using a hammer, he smashed 1 window in each of his adjoining rooms, which both of these windows looked out directly onto the festival grounds. Stephon's room was an armory at that point. He had 24 firearms, including 14 AR-15 assault rifles, 8 .308 caliber AR-10 type rifles, 1 .308 caliber Ruger American bolt action rifle, and 1 .38 caliber Smith & Wesson Model 342 revolver. The 14 AR-15 rifles were equipped with bump stocks, and 12 of them had 100-round magazines. Bump stocks are used to make rifles fire faster, much like machine guns, but with far less accuracy. At 9:36 p.m., he then locked the deadbolt to room 135 and didn't leave the rooms again. Gotta take a deep breath, because this is when things just start to get really, really heavy. So to kind of break this episode up a little bit and just take a quick break, I want to thank our sponsors real quick, and we'll be right back. Our first sponsor today is Honey. I don't know about you, but I shop online a lot, and one of the things I always have trouble finding is promo codes. But with Honey, finding promo codes manually is a thing of the past. Honey is literally the most no-brainer, easiest solution to saving money when online shopping. Honey is a free browser extension that scours the internet for promo codes and applies the best one automatically to your cart. It's absolutely insane how much money Honey saves you. I mean, even just on my meal through DoorDash tonight, I saved a couple bucks with Honey that I wouldn't have saved otherwise, because I would have never found those promo codes. There's some random numbers, and it somehow found it, put it in for me, and boom, saved me $5. So if you don't already have Honey, then you're straight up missing out on free savings. It's literally free and installs in a few seconds. And by getting it, you'll be doing yourself a solid and supporting this podcast. So get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/lightsout. That's joinhoney.com/lightsout. I don't know about you guys, but I absolutely love to eat and I actually love to cook. But oftentimes with my busy schedule, I do not have time to plan out a menu, go to the grocery store, pick out all the ingredients. And oftentimes when I do that, I end up wasting tons of food. I either make way too much or I just don't end up making anything at all. And that food goes to waste. But with meal kits like Every Plate, they not only save you time, but they save you tons of money as well. Every Plate provides easy to follow recipe cards and pre-portioned ingredients, so you can spend less time prepping and cooking and more time enjoying good food with family or loved ones. They change their recipes up all the time, and what I love is they have a good variety of different cuisines too. Every Plate is awesome too because it's extremely affordable, and you can stop and start the service whenever you want. You can switch things out whenever you want. The best thing about Every Plate though is that it is the best bang for the buck meal kit out there, because right now, you can try Every Plate for just $1.99 per meal, plus an additional 20% off your next 2 boxes if you go to everyplate.com and you enter code LIGHTSOUT199. Again, stop ordering takeout and get started with Every Plate now for just $1.99 per meal, plus an additional 20% off another 2 weeks by going to everyplate.com and entering code LIGHTSOUT199. Also want to thank stamps.com for supporting the show. Let's face it, none of us have time to go to the post office. I mean, every time I go, there's a line out the door. It's just a huge hassle. Plus, you end up like juggling all your packages and dropping things. And just overall, I mean, sometimes you live far away from the post office. But now with stamps.com, you get all the services of the post office, but also UPS, plus more, right from the comfort of your own home or office. Not only do you save time by not having to drive to the post office, wait in line, but you also save money as well with exclusive discounts for USPS postage and UPS postage that you can't get anywhere else. Stamps.com is a no-brainer. It'll save you time and money, and it's no wonder nearly 1 million small businesses, including mine, already use Stamps.com. So stop wasting time by going to the post office and go to Stamps.com instead. There's no risk, and with my promo code LIGHTSOUT, you'll get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage and a digital scale. And there's no long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to stamps.com, click on that microphone at the top of the homepage and type in Lights Out. That's stamps.com, use promo code Lights Out. And with stamps.com, you'll never have to go to the post office again. And our last sponsor for today is Bartleby Learn. Bartleby is a monthly subscription service that helps you get homework done fast and homework done right. It's literally an easier way to study hard. With a monthly subscription with Bartleby Learn, you'll get homework help in more than 30 subjects, including business, science, math, and engineering. You'll get step-by-step solutions to millions of textbook problems. There will also be subject matter experts on standby whenever you get stuck, and they'll answer you in as fast as 30 minutes. Plus, there's a searchable database of solutions to homework questions commonly asked by students. So it's literally just a faster, more efficient way to get help and solutions on your homework. I sure wish that there was a service out there like Bartleby Learn when I was still in school. And if you're in school, definitely worth taking a look at because it could really help speed up that homework time, but also help you learn and study much more faster and efficiently. And right now, if you visit getbartleby.com/lightsout, you'll get to ask 10 homework questions for free. That's getbartleby.com/lightsout for your 10 free homework questions. Had to just take a quick break. Hopefully you took a quick break as well. And again, would really appreciate if you check out our sponsors. It does really help us out. And you're also going to directly help out the Vegas Strong Resiliency Center, which we're donating all ad revenue from those sponsors you just heard to that organization. All right, let's go ahead and get back into this horrifying story. It's about to get really crazy. So just forewarning, I'm going to be playing some audio just because I think it really helps wrap your head around what people went through during this event. But just beware that it's going to get much more disturbing from this point on. So again, it's October 1st. It's that night. It's the last night of the Harvest Festival. Jason Aldean's about to go on at 10 p.m. And Stephon Paddock has deadbolted the door to one of his rooms and deadbolted the other about 10 minutes later. And again, because the doors have been open, left closed, this generated an alert to the security at the hotel. And security guard Jesus Campos headed up to the 32nd floor via elevator at 10 p.m. in order to investigate an alert of an open door in a guest room down the hall from Paddock's suite. Once he gets up there, Campos checks a stairwell door that blocked his entry to the floor minutes earlier and discovers that it's been fastened closed with an L bracket. So literally a bracket has been installed into the door in order to keep it shut, like somebody drilled it. So he thought that was obviously very weird. So at 10:04 p.m., Jesus calls security dispatch to report the blocked door. His call, for whatever reason, is just routed to the facility's maintenance department, which then dispatches maintenance engineer Stephen Schuck to go to the floor in order to take a look at it. What's interesting to me is that more eyebrows weren't raised about this L bracket, because it's very, very weird to find an L bracket on a door in a hotel, especially by security. And you know that that's not supposed to be there. So you start wondering, why was this there? But he was just doing his job. He didn't know any other information other than that. And so it was just kind of a routine service call. A minute later, though, Stephon Paddock fires 2 initial shots at the Las Vegas Village, and then he fires some more. Then Jesus Campos hears what he later described as a rapid drilling noises as Stephon Paddock fires about 100 rounds at the concert goers below. Remember, Stephen had placed surveillance cameras outside his room. And so as Jesus Campos starts heading down towards the rooms to look at it further, because at first he's thinking it sounded like jackhammers going off. So he thought that was really weird and was going to go kind of check it out. But again, those service carts are out in the hallway. And Stephen had set up cameras on those so that he could see what was happening outside of his suites. And as soon as he sees Jesus coming towards the suite, Stephon Paddock starts shooting through the door and down the hallway, where he fired a number of shots at him and ended up hitting the security guard in the leg. And again, Jesus is unarmed, so he can't return fire. And the best thing he can do is take cover and radios a hotel dispatcher for help, while also giving them Stephon Paddock's room number on that 32nd floor. After shooting Jesus Campos, Stephon Paddock goes back to firing hundreds of rounds at the concert goers. 2 Las Vegas police officers are already in the building on another call, actually, and they start heading upstairs, presumably to try to find the source of the gunfire, along with 2 armed Mandalay Bay security guards. And over the next 2 minutes, Stephon Paddock takes several pot shots at jet fuel storage tanks at the nearby airport, striking them twice, but not igniting the fuel, before he then turns his fire back on the concert crowd. What's crazy is that literally on the other side of this Las Vegas Village area is the airport. And so he was able to reach these tanks with his weapons, and thank God wasn't able to blow these up. I mean, that would have been, I don't even want to know what that would have done. That would have been catastrophic. But then at 10:10 p.m., Stephen Schuck, the building engineer, finally arrives on the 32nd floor, and Jesus Campos yells for him to take cover. And obviously, Stephon Paddock is also watching the hallway, and he sees him come up as well. And so Stephon Paddock starts firing down the hallway again. And it's at this point that Stephen Schuck radios hotel dispatch to send the police to the 32nd floor. And we'll play a little bit of that hotel radio call for you now.
Call the police. Someone's firing a gun up here. Someone's firing a rifle on the 32nd floor down the hallway. It's at the end of the hallway. I can't tell you what room. He looked like he fired down the hallway when I got close to the door.
After that second call for help and for the fact that somebody's shooting on the 32nd floor, obviously the authorities now know that they need to head up to the 32nd floor, but they don't know what they're dealing with. And they don't know with how many people they're dealing with, how many people are actually shooting. This was still a mystery at this point, as they just heard, these 2 heard bullets going off, but they had no idea how many people were up there or if there was any others in other areas. I mean, they had literally no idea. So as soon as they take cover and they're kind of just waiting for help to come, Stephon Paddock opens up again on the concert goers below. And I'm going to go ahead and play just a little bit of some cell phone footage that was captured from that night to kind of give you a real look at what people were experiencing that night.
They're not real gunshots. What is it? I don't know. Let me just stay on top of this. I know, but I have to stay on top of it. You don't understand. I have to stay on top of it. We're going to get trampled if we don't go.
Once Stephon Paddock started firing on the crowd, it did take a little bit of time for people to really realize what was going on. I mean, it's a concert, it's a music festival. There's 22,000 people there. I mean, it's really loud, music playing. So at first, people thought it was firecrackers. I mean, nobody thought it was gunshots. But shortly after, Stephon Paddock fired, stopped, fired again, stopped, fired again, that's when people knew. Because the music stopped, Jason Aldean and his crew completely fled the stage, and the crowd got really quiet. And that's when people just started running. And they started realizing and seeing people go down, being hit by all these bullets that were just raining down on them. And it's just absolutely insane to think what it would be like to be in that position where you're literally running for your life. Like fight or flight kicks in and you don't know where the bullets are coming from. You don't know where the shooters are. You have no clue even really what's happening other than the fact that you're watching people be pelted by these bullets, hitting the ground. They're screaming. I mean, absolute chaos. And I mean, people are obviously on their phones. They're calling 911, and 911 was getting so hammered by people calling that there was like people on hold. And when you call 911, the last thing you want to be told is to wait on hold for an emergency call. So with that being said, I want to play some of the 911 calls that people placed.
Oh my God, they're still shooting. Oh my God. They're still shooting. And your friend has been shot? Oh my God.
Hello? I don't know where you are. You have to give me an address.
The whole concert's down on the ground.
Mandalay Bay Security Dispatch, we have an active shooter in room 32135.
32135.
Yep, 32nd floor, Mandalay Bay, 135.
Just utter chaos, man. I mean, you're just running for your life at that point. You're just hoping you don't get hit by bullets. And you're hoping you're not getting trampled. I mean, with that many people, be very easy to get trampled by the crowd and not be able to escape. And on top of that, there was a security fence around the venue, which blocked many people who were trying to escape. So some people just kind of ducked for cover, tried to just lay in place and hope they weren't hit. But no one had any clue what was happening. They didn't know where the gunman was. They didn't even really know where the bullets were coming from. I mean, even police officers were completely confused. And at first there was reports from different hotels that there was bullets. I think the Tropicana Hotel, they had somebody call that said that there was a shooter there. I mean, there was all these reports coming in that there was multiple shooters, that there was multiple origins of gunshots happening. I mean, it was just, everybody's just kind of running around, looking every which way, not sure which way is the safe way, which way is the way to escape. So people are just trying to get out of there as fast as possible. And I mean, people are going down. And this is one of those events where I have to give the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police the credit they deserve, because they were absolutely heroes in this particular event. I mean, to be in this absolute chaotic situation and to be running into, the concert venue to try to get people out of there, to get people that have been shot into vehicles. I mean, it was just absolute mass pandemonium. And to be in that type of position, I don't think many of us have any clue what that's like. And just, I have so much respect for police officers that take their duty and their service seriously. And they're really there to protect and serve and risk their own life in order to save other people. I have nothing but respect for any officer, any first responder that does that. I mean, it's being selfless. And let's check out some of this body cam footage of what the officers were dealing with firsthand. I mean, it's absolutely astounding what they dealt with.
Go that way. Hey, they're shooting right at us, guys. Everybody stay down. Stay down. Where's it at? North of the Manly Base, coming out of a window. Is that a back? This way. Go. That way.
I mean, just based off of that body cam footage, it really gives you a sense of what it was like to be there. I mean, firsthand. And obviously it's a tiny glimpse into what people actually went through, but just hearing the bullets in the background, you can hear the rapid fire of bullets just raining down on people. And, after a while, they got enough information that they're like, okay, there's those broken windows up there on the Mandalay Bay. That's where the bullets are coming down from. But again, I mean, there's just so much confusion. They really had no idea how many gunmen were there. That's what's so scary, is that in this type of situation, nobody had seen gunmen. Nobody knew where they were. So it's this giant mystery still. They know it's coming from maybe this direction, but then again, there was like people seeing, what looked like guns going off. I mean, also at night in Las Vegas, there's all these lights. Yeah, it's true. Completely lit up. So, a lot of these weapons are going to give off a muzzle flash. So you're going to be able to see, muzzle flash out the window. And I think that's kind of how they spotted him shooting out of those broken windows, which I'm like, with the broken windows, I'm like, how is there no alarms on the broken windows?
Good point. Right.
Why wasn't that, like, really? If you break a window in a hotel like that, there's not a alarm that goes off?
Mm-hmm. I would think there would be, but apparently not.
Seems like a safety hazard to not have an alarm.
Yeah.
Because what if somebody tried to jump out a window or break it do something like that? There's no alarm. That it's interesting that the only way they knew to go up to the 32nd floor was the open door alarm on that floor.
Mm-hmm.
That it wasn't the windows. I don't know. That's just kind of interesting to me.
Definitely.
But it's very hard and confusing at night. It's loud in Las Vegas. There's tons of lights. The city's just lit up at night. So, I mean, it'd be very tough to know, where gunshots are coming from. And there's reflections, there's glass everywhere. So it's just so chaotic. It's absolutely crazy. But while all this was happening, many of the people who were there started to record on their cell phones. And many of them thought that this would be some of their last moments alive. And as the shooting continued, more people were hit. They started plugging bullet holes with their fingers and holding their hands against their bodies to help stop the bleeding. Off-duty officers and anyone with law enforcement and military experience tried to help organize the chaos. They told people where to run and to stay low and keep moving. Some people even ran toward the danger in order to help those who had been shot, to get them to safety, or to just figure out where the gunshots were coming from. People were desperately calling out for medics, and strangers literally pulled each other off of the ground, helping them get up and move, and literally just getting people into strangers' vehicles passing by to get them to the hospital because there wasn't enough ambulances. There's no way to get people the help they needed as fast as they needed to do it. But the bursts of gunfire range from 80 to 100 rounds. 1,058 rifle rounds were shot from 15 firearms up to 490 yards into the crowd. And again, at one point, Stephon shot 8 bullets at a jet fuel tank approximately 2,000 feet away at McCarran International Airport. 2 of the shots hit the tank, but because it was mostly kerosene, which is less likely to ignite, it thankfully didn't explode. Officers on the ground again, were confused, had no idea where things were coming from, but they suspected the bullets were coming from the Mandalay Bay, but they still weren't sure because there was a ton of false reports of additional shooters, which only added to the confusion, and it slows down the response time because, I mean, the officers now have to account for all the possible scenarios that could unfold. They thought this was a full-on like terrorist attack organized by a bunch of people that carried this out, and that they were going to be, this could have been one wave of many throughout the entire night. So they really had no clue, who was behind this or how many people were involved. By 10:12 p.m., 2 armed Mandalay Bay security officers arrived on the 32nd floor, and the police and security officers on the 31st floor realized that the shooting was coming from one floor above them. At 10:13 p.m., the police on the ground saw the flashes of gunfire coming from the windows in the hotel. They reported the shots were coming from high up on the north side. And then 2 minutes after that, at 10:15 p.m., the shooting abruptly stopped. All of this had happened in about 10 minutes. By 10:16 p.m., the news of the attacks had spread across social media. And at 10:17 p.m., the police officers finally stepped onto the 32nd floor, where Jesus, the injured security guard, told them which room the shots were coming from. At 10:20 p.m., an officer reported that it had been a while since they heard any shots, and they were outside room 135 by 10:24 p.m. and were waiting there for the SWAT team to arrive. And again, at this point, law enforcement had no idea how many shooters they were dealing with, and at that point, they issued an active shooter alert at 10:25 p.m. because they believed they were dealing with 2 or 3 attackers. Taxi drivers in the area received a message from the police about possibly 3 active shooters at the hotel and were told to avoid the area. And between 10:26 p.m. and 10:30 p.m., 8 more officers joined those already on the 32nd floor. Jesus gave them the master key, and they searched and cleared each hotel room one by one, checking on guests and evacuating them. Even with a bullet wound in his leg, Jesus still helped lead countless people to safety. Also at 10:30, police officers on the ground were starting to bring people into the hotel in case more shots were fired. The active shooter alert was confirmed at 10:38 through the Las Vegas Police Department's Twitter account, and officers inside the hotel continued to wait for the SWAT teams to arrive. By 10:55, all guests had been evacuated from their rooms, and the SWAT team, when they finally arrived, they used an explosive device to open the door to room 135, and they blew the door wide open at 11:20. After they breached Stephon Paddock's suite, they came in, and right away it was apparent they had the right suite because there was guns, ammunition littered everywhere. And right away, that's when they walked in and found Stephon Paddock lying dead on the ground. He had shot himself in the head. They ended up blowing the doors off the other suite to the adjoining room to search that. But at 11:27 p.m., they confirmed that the suspect was down over the police radio. But the shooting wasn't officially declared over until 12:31 a.m. on Monday, October 2nd, and the Las Vegas Police Department put out another tweet confirming that the suspect was down. But again, they wanted to make sure that there was nobody else involved, and they just didn't know. But from, once they got into Stephon Paddock's room, it became very clear that this was most likely their one and only suspect. As a result of this absolute massacre, sadly, 58 people lost their lives, and 868 people were injured. No one inside the hotel was killed, and Jason Aldean, who had been performing when it started, confirmed that him and his crew were safe. And what's crazy is that throughout that entire night, they were still doing searches. They were making absolutely sure there wasn't any other threats out there, and they weren't even able to secure the scene for the coroner to come in till the next day, till later that morning. And the Clark County Coroner's Office confirmed that every victim died of gunshot wounds. 31 people died during the shooting, and 25 died that night at the hospital, with an additional 2 deaths on October 3rd. The official death toll of this event was actually raised to 61, including the shooter later on in 2020. A 57-year-old woman who had been paralyzed the day of the shooting died in 2019, and her official cause of death was related to the shooting. In May of 2020, a 49-year-old woman had been shot in the leg, died from complications as a result of that injury. And that's what's so just absolutely crazy, is that this was an absolute war zone. This was literally what soldiers experience in war.
Yeah.
Automatic gunfire like this and just bullets raining down on you. And I mean, 61 people dead, but 800 plus people seriously injured, if not carrying critical injuries for the rest of their life.
That's so many people. Like,
I mean, that's just, it's really hard to wrap your head around that.
It is.
It really is. Initially, the Las Vegas police declined to include these deaths in the official count, but this decision was changed on October 1st, 2020, approximately 3 years after the attack. But this was the deadliest shooting by a single gunman since 49 people were killed at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando on June 12, 2016. And to this day, it remains the deadliest mass shooting in North American history. The night of the massacre, injured people were taken to several local hospitals. Over 50% of those injured were transported in cars and not ambulances. Interstate 15 had been shut down, and those taking injured people in their own vehicles didn't know, which added to the chaos. Also, there was even more confusion when a false report went out that one of the hospitals had reached capacity an hour after the shooting. All 4 runways at McCarran International Airport were shut down for hours, and over 25 flights were rerouted. 300 people fled to the airport grounds in order to escape the gunfire. In the hours after the shooting, the SWAT team searched all local businesses. I mean, they had to, because they just didn't know. And at 9 a.m. on October 2nd, Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo publicly announced that the shooter had been identified as Stephon Paddock. And during a police news conference, they asked for any public information about the shooting and gave an FBI number to call if someone took footage on their cell phone. They also provided a number to call to locate loved ones who may have been injured and killed, and asked anyone who was able to donate blood. And the people of Las Vegas really came out to support those affected by this. And that's why I'm donating to the Vegas Strong Resiliency Center, because there are still people that are dealing with injuries as a result of this horrific attack. And I mean, this was not even that long ago. This is like 4 years ago. So there's people that are going to be dealing with the injuries of this attack for the rest of their lives. So it's just in times of absolute horror, it's amazing to see how people, come together and help each other out and really support each other, come out and donate, give blood, and really provide support for these victims. But kind of when all this is going on, the police are really launching their investigation into Stephon Paddock, because obviously they want to figure out, was this planned? Was there any other things they needed to know about? And so they headed out to Stephon's home in Mesquite with a search warrant by 9 a.m. the following day. And the search was slow, taking one step at a time to make sure there was no explosives or other booby traps. They also disassembled and searched his minivan, which was still parked at the hotel. They ended up finding explosives at his home and in the van. Between the hotel room, Stephon's home, and his place at the Ogden, they found 42 guns, and at least one had been turned into an automatic weapon. Law enforcement had the really tough job of trying to investigate this guy, because there was just tons of false information that was being spread around about the shooter online and through social media. ISIS even claimed Stephon Paddock as one of their soldiers, but there was no evidence of this ever found. The FBI also dismissed reports that he was part of ISIS or any sort of terrorist group. He was not part of Antifa. And stories about a second gunman and stories that misidentified the shooter had to be shut down. So that's why they were, chasing down every lead. After searching through Stephon Paddock's van, his house, investigators combed through 4 laptops and 3 cell phones. And on those were hundreds of child pornography photos. And they also discovered that he had thoroughly researched and planned the attack. And through the investigation, some small details of the police timeline also have changed, which made some people suspicious. But the police have said that these changes are normal in complex investigations like this one. Investigators watched 22,000 hours of video footage and studied 252,000 images. They followed up on over 2,000 leads and interviewed everyone in Stephon's life, including his girlfriend Mary Lou Danley, who was in the Philippines at the time of the shooting. She was briefly considered a person of interest, but later cleared. What makes this situation unique with Stephon Paddock is the fact that he didn't leave a suicide note, and all he left behind was a handwritten note that calculated the distance, wind, and trajectory from his hotel room, which they found when they bust through into his suite. They also found a bulletproof vest and breathing apparatus in the room, but he hadn't used them. Fingerprints on ammunition in the hotel room belonged to an ammunition dealer in Arizona named Douglas Haig, and he was charged with conspiracy to manufacture and sell armor-piercing ammunition without a license and ended up serving 13 months in prison. Las Vegas police completed their investigation on August 3rd, 2018, and the FBI completed their investigation on January 29th, 2019. A behavioral analyst with the FBI concluded that there was no single or clear motivating factor for the shooting. But there are several speculations about why Stephon carried out this attack. As Stephon got older, he became more isolated, and a family friend told investigators that Stephon hired sex workers and had hired a sex worker just days before the shooting. He seemed easily overwhelmed, and the FBI speculated that the stress of aging could have affected his actions. They also believed he wanted to achieve infamy and die by suicide. He could have been a narcissistic thrill seeker. These types of killers want to inflict as much damage as possible and enjoy watching other people suffer. Some have theorized that he was in debt from his gambling, but he left a lot of money behind, so this is unlikely. His doctor believed he suffered from depression. If he was suicidal, he could have decided to take out other people with him. The child pornography on his computer suggests that he didn't care about exploiting innocent victims to get what he wanted. His methodical, elaborate planning suggested that he wanted everyone to see how smart he was. There are some other questions about his childhood. One of his brothers, Bruce, was arrested and charged with possession of child pornography, but the charges were later dropped. But two brothers caught with child pornography makes it more likely that something from their childhood may have severely messed them up. Which to me, this tells me that there's probably other things that happened in his childhood and his past that we just don't know about. I mean, we really don't know that much about his upbringing. We don't know about really much of anything of major significance other than the public information that's out there about his father. And even when the media went to Eric Paddock, one of Stephon's brothers, and they interviewed him after the shooting, and he said even he was completely shocked by what his brother had done and had no idea why. And according to him, in the previous 6 months, they had only exchanged a few brief text messages, which tells me that Stephon Paddock was truly isolated, and he was truly like in his own world at that point. And his brother, I think, said something along the lines of, this happening was like an asteroid hitting Earth. Like nobody could have seen it coming. Like it was just as much of a surprise to him as it was to all of us. But at the end of the day, it's really hard to know why Stephon Paddock did this. I think there is a lot of things we don't know. I think there's a lot of probably questions that will never be answered because the guy who has the answers is dead. I think clearly there is mental illness here. I think there's probably things from his past that may have played into this. But I mean, at the end of the day, the police, the FBI, all said that they have no idea what would have motivated him to do this. They found no evidence of any clear reason. And I think that's what's so bizarre and just so crazy, honestly, about this event is that we just, why do this? It was really just to go out and be this infamous character. I mean, I don't get it. I guess we don't understand all the crazy things people do, but this just seems like, I don't know. I'm just at a loss for words. I don't even know what to say about this one. This is just hard to wrap your mind around that somebody, a human being, would want to do something like this. But if that wasn't crazy enough, a month after the shooting, a lawsuit was filed against Mandalay Bay Hotel and MGM Resorts International on behalf of 450 victims. The lawsuit claimed the hotel was negligent because Stephon Paddock was able to bring in so many weapons. And in July of 2018, MGM Resorts International literally countersued the victims. And they say this is just a legal move, that they just did this to basically protect their own ass, and that, it was no way disrespectful toward the victims. But honestly, I think MGM Resorts definitely has some blame here. But 2 years after the shooting, a settlement of $800 million in restitution was reached, and this was approved by a judge on September 30th, 2020. The settlement will be divided among over 4,000 victims and family members, which this was a huge win for the victims. And this happened on the 3rd anniversary of the shooting. And it's the largest settlement ever given for a tragedy like this. But unfortunately, some legal issues have slowed down the compensation. But hopefully the disbursement of the settlement is on track to begin in March of 2021. So this year. I'm just glad that after all of this, that the victims are going to get some restitution, hopefully, to hopefully help them. I mean, so many people have endless medical bills. I mean, their lives are changed forever. I mean, the amount of damage is just beyond repair at this point, but at least some of this money might help them, recover and help them pay for some of the bills they might have. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this episode up here. So these episodes are just always so hard because by the end of these, I'm just like, the best way to describe it is just this overall heaviness.
Definitely.
My chest right now just feels like I have a sandbag in it. Like my heart is just so heavy. And when you watch this footage and you hear this people screaming and you hear the bullets flying, it's hard to believe that this was real. This is a real thing that happened, that people really went through this. I mean, this seems like something out of a movie, almost like something like out of a horrible plot of a movie, but this was real. And this could happen again. This could happen anywhere. I mean, to wrap your head around the fact that you really aren't safe anywhere in these large events. And I mean, I'm glad that they've taken steps to try to avoid this, and they're watching guests more closely. Security's definitely amped up a ton after this, especially and with the pandemic. I mean, we haven't had any music festivals like this, so there hasn't been opportunities for things like this to happen. But I mean, this isn't the only mass shooting that's happened in a live music setting like this before. But the idea that somebody could bring 42 guns into a hotel, up to a suite, and launch a full-out attack like Stephon Paddock did is just mind-blowing, honestly. I just don't understand why these big hotels wouldn't have somebody like watching the cameras and notice, because Stephon Paddock is coming. I mean, he's coming through kind of back areas and stuff, as they say, through the service elevators. But like, it's just wild that with how many people are coming in and out of your hotel, and it's your job to provide safety for them. Like, why wouldn't you be a little suspicious that one guy is bringing in 21 bags? Like, that seems like way out of the ordinary.
And they're big bags, to hold all those guns. And they got to be heavy. Like, come on. That's
just like, and honestly, that's why I'm like, MGM Resorts absolutely is responsible, because there is negligence there. They should have.
Right.
I mean, come on. Like,
and you made up a good point earlier. Why don't they have sensors on their windows?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
That could have prevented it.
I think that we all assume that these hotels, like if you were to break a window like that, an alarm would go off and somebody would be rushing up to the room. But the fact that that's not the case, because God, how did he knock out 2 windows and nobody outside saw like before that? But I guess he did at night, so it's hard to see. But it's crazy that this all unfolded in the way it did, and yet he was able to do so much damage without people knowing that this was going to go down. Like, it's just wild.
And how terrifying that must have been for everyone not knowing where those gunshots were coming from. I mean, talk about a helpless situation.
Yeah. I can't even wrap my head around it. Again, I want to just say that in this case, I think the police did about as good of a job as they could have possibly done. I mean, they didn't know what they were dealing with. They could have been dealing with an army of attackers for all they knew. But I think, you can always point at things and be like, oh, they could have did this more effectively. They could have gotten up to the 32nd floor faster, and they could have stopped this way sooner. But it's just like, it's hard to judge people in that type of position in this circumstance without actually being in it. And when you don't know. And again, there's all these reports going around. So I think at the end of the day, I mean, the police did save a lot of lives. They were being medics. They were calling people out.
And so did the civilians who were there as well.
Everybody stepped up.
Definitely.
To help save a ton of lives. And this could have been a far higher death toll, I believe, if the response wasn't as fast, if Stephon Paddock had been able to be up there, if Jesus Campos hadn't gone up there. I think that really threw him off was the fact that Jesus Campos, a security guard, went up there and basically alerted everybody to a situation happening on the 32nd floor. And once he knew that he was up there and then the building engineer was up there, I think Stephon Paddock knew that this was going to be a short attack because they were on their way.
Right.
And and clearly this was a suicide mission. I mean, there was he wasn't going to be caught. He wasn't going to be arrested. This was he was planning this clearly to just end it before he was captured.
And just by his appearance, someone I would have never guessed would do. Like, he's like an old man.
Yeah, he's like an accounting guy.
Yeah.
Like, you just would never, no one ever guessed that this guy would be capable of doing something like this.
And he was a regular there too. So people just, hey, what's up type of thing.
It's just one of those things. It's like, can you really prevent something like this? Sometimes it's just like, I don't know if there is a way to prevent this. Like, because sometimes it's the most unsuspecting people that end up doing the most heinous things. So, but we'll go ahead and end today's episode there. And the way I want to end this episode is by remembering those that lost their lives on that day. And we'll just go ahead and end it there. The moment of silence for the victims. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.